My name is Reggie Barnes. I'm the Director of Patient Partnership for the Autoimmune Registry. And welcome to our first webinar for 2026. We have the great pleasure of having Ceciel Rooker, the President of the International Foundation for Gastrointestinal Disorder. And I'll touch on some of the great achievements that she has. She has a long history of working to advance digestive health issues and deep understanding of the needs of patient, families, and healthcare professionals uh, as it affects functional disorders and mortality of the digestive disorder systems. Uh, with over a decade of experience, Cecilia has made a very large impact on a lot of different fronts, from policymaking at the Capitol Hill and also the NIH, and also advancing the impact internationally. Her efforts, as touched on by her many achievements in working with different groups across the platform, and her voice is a very needed voice for leadership in the autoimmune community. With that, I would like to turn it over to Ceciel, and we'll take it from there.
Thank you, Reggie. I appreciate that. And thank you for inviting me to speak today. I'm thrilled to be here. And after that introduction, I hope I can live up to all that you said about me. So let me take a moment to sort of tell you who I am. Like Reggie said, I am Ceciel Rooker, and I'm the president and executive director for the International Foundation for Gastrointestinal Disorders, or IFFGD. As a person, I am a woman who has two diagnosed GI conditions and many undiagnosed symptoms. I have three children, two of which have GI disorders, and so working with patients for patients is something that has sort of been like the culmination of my career and something that is very real to me. And I know so many of you probably are the same way. You have a friend or a loved one that sort of sparked your interest into getting into this world and to helping others. But even if it's not, even if you honestly are just really, really great at what you do and your organization selected you as a leader, just understanding sort of the needs of the community is so important. And I want to talk a little bit about the work with advocacy and awareness, because it is one of the pillars that IFFGD is sort of grounded on. And for me, that's very important. But there are other things that we do as well. So let me start with an introduction of IFFGD as a whole and sort of our timeline. As I tell people, I'm going to give you the elevator speech, but it's a really tall building, so please bear with me, okay? So IFFGD was started 35 years ago by a woman named Nancy Norton, who was rendered incontinent, fecally incontinent after childbirth. And unfortunately, this is really just not as uncommon as we would like it to be. And it certainly isn't well talked about. And just think about 35 years ago in the culture of society, and we're talking about fecal incontinence, it really wasn't talked about. And the doctors really didn't know a whole lot, and the patients were unguided. And so Nancy Norton really set out to learn more. And along her journey, over all of the years that she served this community, she had so many people sort of join her. She built a community of patients, a community that started with people like her who had fecal incontinence after childbirth, which turned into people who had fecal continence not because of childbirth. And then it turned into other people with GI conditions who weren't getting the assistance they needed and the education. And Nancy Norton, being an extremely intelligent and very driven woman, began to work to better understand so she could help herself and help others. And through this, she read lots of journal articles, wanted to know the latest research. And then she took it a step forward and she went to medical meetings. So she started attending meetings like Digestive Disease Week, that's held through the AGA, and then, of course, the ACG gastroenterology conference, as well as others. And in doing this, what she did was she began to learn from these lectures, but she would walk up to the instructor, the teachers afterwards, the academicians, and she'd say, so I have more questions. And believe it or not, they were very great to give her the answers. And so they began this dialogue, and she began to connect with the physicians that actually did the real-time research in the disease states that she was interested in. She built relationships with them to the point that they began to do work for free. So they would write fact sheets to educate her and educate others within the community. And so she would have this, she had this whole just plethora of information. And so she used that information to create these fact sheets. The fact sheets became the core of the websites. IFFGD started with one, and we now have 12. And so we have several child sites that dig into specific disease states, and then some that just work with symptoms. But with over 400 today, it has sort of been the core of what we've done, educating people, but also building that relationship with physicians. And as Nancy did that, she started asking questions they couldn't answer. And so then the physicians would just say, I don't know the answer to that. And then Nancy would say, why not? And then, of course, the answer to that, as we all know, is research. And so then Nancy realized that we needed to not just have a community, we not just need to educate, but we also need to help facilitate research in some way. And so there are three ways that we do that at IFFGD. One is through actual funding of research grants, travel awards for academicians. We have decided in these recent years to focus on the junior folks. We used to have a junior award program and an advanced award program, and that's fine too. But with the dollars being a little bit tighter, as we all know, we are focusing really on developing that next generation of thought leaders. But not only that, there's so much more that you can do. We really, truly advocate for patient involvement in research. And honestly, that's probably the most important key, is really advocating with patients and saying, listen, if we want to move that needle forward, we have to be a part of that process. And research doesn't get finished, drugs don't get across the finish line if we don't have participants, and not just participants to sign up, participants to do the whole thing, even if they're on placebo, right? And so what we've done is we've built a research core within IFFGD that facilitates research ourselves as well. So we do a lot of surveys because we feel that a lot of what we do, we need to hear from patients before we can take a step. Because while I have many GI disorders within my family and they're all different, that doesn't mean I'm the voice for everybody. And so in order for me to be able to communicate what the community needs, we do a lot of surveys in-house. And so we do that ourselves. We also, of course, like I said, we advocate for people to participate in research, and then we fund research when we can. And that was very, very important. But IFFGD can only do so much. So Nancy was talking to the researchers and said, well, how do we get more money, right? Like, how do we do this? And they said, well, the biggest funder for medical research worldwide is right here in the United States, and it's the NIH. But the NIH only gives a certain amount of money to gastrointestinal disorders outside of certain larger disorders. And so she said, well, let me go talk to them. And she did. And that is really and truly how the advocacy arm of IFFGD began and how it began to thrive. And there's so much more to advocacy than doing a Hill Day. And those are fantastic. As a matter of fact, IFFGD does one every year. We'll have one in April. If anyone wants to join us, email me. We'd be happy to have you on the Hill with us. But there's a lot more to advocacy than people realize. And so the bulk of what I talk about today, and where I'm going to start from here on out, is to really talk about all of those options that you have as an organization. IFFGD is a larger organization with a really large footprint. We have over 40 disease states in our portfolio. So we have a really, really strong advocacy arm because we represent millions of people worldwide. Some organizations are smaller, maybe you're just starting out. Maybe you have a very specific disease state that you really focus in on, and it's rare, right? And so you may not have the ability to do the big hill days or to do certain things, but there are things that you can do. And one of the very first things that I recommend if you're interested in getting involved in advocacy as it relates to making change in lawmakers is to begin to look for coalitions with like mind to you. And so for IFFGD, we're actually a member of about 10. And from the Safe Step Act Coalition, and many of you may be aware of that piece of legislation where patients have to go step by step through a process to get the medication that they really need because the insurance companies are going to deny them until they do. And so there's different pieces of legislation that are very specific like that. There's a copay accumulators. There's the Medical Foods Coalition for to get medical foods covered. So there's a lot of these little coalitions that are really specific, and maybe there are some in your your therapeutic area that really are important to your patient group. You need to seek those out. You need to talk to them. One, make sure that you're on the same page, right? You don't want to join a group that you don't agree with because you're joining their voice and you're making their voice stronger. And if you don't agree with what they're saying, then don't do it. Maybe have a sounding board of someone else that you trust, a medical advisor, some patients, and then yourself to kind of discuss, is this a coalition that we're interested in joining? There are also larger coalitions as well. So for digestive diseases, which is a huge, um, obviously, system in the body, there is a Digestive Disease National Coalition. And IFFGD has been a member of that from really the beginning. And that particular coalition brings together patient advocacy organizations along with physician medical societies and then of course industry as well. And so all three stakeholders work together on different things that are important to us in Washington. And the reason that that is important is not just that the squeaky wheel gets the grease or more voices mean more change. It really and truly means more education for everyone. Because if everyone has their ear to the ground, then we're really thinking that you're going to hear more of what's happening in Washington. And that's important because even as big as IFFGD is, it would take us hiring a full-time person at 40 hours a week to scour everything that's going on in Congress, everything that's going on with the VA and the DOD, and what kind of legislation is happening, what's going on with appropriations, and we still wouldn't be able to be on top of everything. And so joining these coalitions is going to be really important in building your advocacy. And IFFGD not only has done that, we've gotten to the point now where we place ourselves or volunteer for leadership positions in those. So with the Digestive Disease National Coalition, I was the chairwoman for 3 years during COVID, and I am currently the treasurer of the DDNC. And so making sure that you are having your voice heard within these coalitions, but then also taking leadership positions in them so that you can help to guide that conversation to make sure that the needs of your patient community is being met through those coalitions as well. So coalitions are really, really important. The other good thing is that they often do Hill events, and Hill events can be very, very costly to do. To actually fly people into Washington, D.C., get them trained and ready, and then get them on the Hill. And so you can, in your community, your patients can join these other coalitions for their Hill days. And I just want to take a moment to say, if you've never been on the Hill with a group of patients speaking to congressional offices, you need to. It is honestly, it's a very moving experience because patients want to be heard. And when you give them that opportunity, when you tell them, I'm going to allow you to go to the Hill, I'm going to facilitate that for you, I'm going to schedule that meeting for you, I'm going to get you in front of these congressional offices so you can share your story with them, it's powerful for the patient. And so I just really encourage you to try to do that if you can. And if you have any questions about that, by all means, please contact me. But going on the Hill means a lot. And that means that you have to know what's going on. What are the issues that are pertinent to your community, whether it be the legislation I've already talked about or medical research funding, right? That's a key for all of us. Like that's really high on our list because without medical research funding, we're not going to move forward to help these patients. And so advocating for appropriations to give that 8% increase to the NIH is important, right? And then also don't forget the other governmental agencies that might be important to you. For GI disease, we also work with the DoD and the VA. I also have some connections with PCORI and make sure that I'm involved with them as well. And the CDC, just all the different government agencies, that's important, right? But when you're looking at the different things that are important to your community, make sure that you hone in on those. And so medical research funding is another thing that's very important to us. Patient access to care is another thing that's very, very important to us. But then also awareness. So we work with the CDC. We worked with a coalition of organizations who actually petitioned Congress for many, many years to create a new CDC program on education and awareness that would rotate. So it's sort of like you put in an NIH grant and it's one thing. So it's sort of the same thing. It's a 3-year program, and any of you can do this. You can apply to the CDC for funding. It's a 3-year program. And you're able to raise awareness about one specific thing for 3 years through funding through the CDC. That was important to us, and we advocated for that for a long time. And now we spend a lot of time advocating for not only the continuation of that program, but hopefully an increase in funding so that more people can get funded to do that. So you find your niche, you realize what you want to do, and you take that to the Hill. And it's important that you not only educate yourself before you go, but that you educate your people. And so IFFGD will have our advocacy event, and it will be in April, mid-April. And we fly everybody in on Saturday or early Sunday morning, depending on their health. And then we educate them for 8 hours on Sunday. And lots of breaks, because we know some patients just really can't go a full 8 hours. And if your community it's for, that's okay. We've done that before too. You just have to look at your audience, but we educate them about the actual the legislation, the issues, the medical research funding, all of that, FDA access, whatever it is, and make sure that they're knowledgeable and they're confident. And then on Monday, we schedule meetings on the Hill. And so people go to the Hill, we take a bus, we bus them to the Capitol, and we spend all day walking around and talking to people. And so that sort of event is really, it's empowering, and can be a really, really amazing experience. And really and truly, that is sort of the congressional angle. That Hill Day is really important. I've done Hill Days where it's just been 5 or 6 of us, and we just go, and we all go together and meet. I've done Hill Days alone, and so just myself and one other person who is our Washington representative. We were lucky enough to be able to secure a company that works with nonprofits. And so they're sort of our liaison into Washington to make things a little bit easier. And if you have the funds to do that, can be very helpful. But it's not necessary. There are ways to do that on your own. And here are some other things that you can do if like that Hill Day is a little bit too much. Well, how do you get your foot in the door, and how do you start making difference and making a change? And honestly, the governmental agencies are pretty much required by law to meet with you. They have to talk to you. They can't tell you no. So as long as you're being reasonable in your requests. So you just call them. If you go to the website, if you're like, you know what? I'm interested in the CDC thing. I want to learn more about what the CDC does. Go to their website, find out how to meet with them. It's all clearly laid out. You set that appointment and you show up and you walk in the door and you tell them what you have to say. You ask them the questions you want to ask. That is true with any of the heads of any of the NIH centers. And everybody, like if you email them, it may be a while. You might have a 3-4 month wait, kind of like trying to get to see a specialist, right? But they will eventually meet with you. You can meet with the Department of Defense the VA. You can sit down and meet with people at the FDA and just email them and say, hey, listen, I'd like to sit down and talk about what's going on in, drug making in a specific disease state. I've done it multiple times. As a matter of fact, in gastroparesis, which is one of our disease states that we um, support. It's a rare disorder, and gastroparesis literally means paralysis of the stomach. So what happens is people's stomachs just don't work. And so they are unable to digest food because it just comes right back up when they eat it. And it's devastating. We lose patients monthly who are just nutritionally deficient, who are just unable to thrive. Their bodies just shut down. Not to mention the emotional toll that it takes on these people who are unable to participate in Thanksgiving anymore. Um, Going out to eat is not really an option. And that is so much of our culture, right? Like, hey, let's grab a coffee. Oh, let's go to dinner. Hey, let's grab lunch. Those are things that are normal that for people with gastroparesis, it's very difficult. And we haven't had a drug cross the finish line since the 70s. And that's a long time, folks. And it's been really terrible. Over my tenure with IFFGD, which has been 10 years, there have been over 5 drugs that have made it to like phase 3 and then denied. And so after the last drug denial, I actually got on my email. I emailed the FDA and I said, we really need to talk. So can I understand a little bit about what's going on? And I know that IFFG is a long history. So Nancy and Bill Norton met with the FDA for a long time. They helped get IBS drugs across the finish line and helping the FDA through multiple facilitated conversations as to what the needs of the patients were so that they better understood the endpoints that they needed for the drug trials, which helped get drugs for IBS across the finish line. And so I sat down with them with gastroparesis. They had 5 people in the room to listen to what I had to say. We talked about next steps and what can we do. And the end result of that meeting is that IFFGD held a thought leader meeting in Washington. And we flew in 13 thought leaders in gastroparesis. All the people who have published in PubMed were at the table. The FDA sent 4 representatives from the FDA to be at that meeting with us. The NIH sent representatives to be at that meeting with us, and we brought patients. And we had an all-day meeting discussing gastroparesis and what can we do to move that needle forward. I'm not saying that will happen every time you sit down with the FDA, but they will work with you, right? They will give you suggestions. They will talk to you about what they need. And then you can see if you can give them back what they need, right? If they're needing a certain specific bit of information, then you can see what you can do to work with them. And they're very open to helping patients because that's what they do. That's their job. That's their whole job, is to help us as a patient community. And so those are the things that you can at least attempt to get yourself to that table by making those phone calls, sending those emails, and sitting down with a very clear agenda of what you're looking for out of the meeting. We're not sitting with the FDA just to talk to them, right? Like, that's a waste of their time. It's a waste of yours. And so you go in, make sure that you're really prepared to say, the reason I'm here today is because I serve a patient population that's suffering, and this is who they are, and this is what their needs are, and we want to know how we can move that needle forward. And so make sure that you're really prepared. But you can meet with any of the government agencies just on a one-on-one, just your organization and them. Sometimes, obviously, honestly, it's better if you can have multiple organizations go with you. The governmental agencies love collaboration. They love to know that you are working together. And most importantly, they like to know everyone's on the same page. So it's really important. So when we go on the Hill and we ask for a certain appropriations amount or for medical research funding, or we're asking for certain pieces of legislation, we ensure that we're working with these coalitions and working with others, talking to other people so that we're all saying the same thing. Because I've been told personally by people in governmental agencies that until everyone gets on the same page, they're not making a decision to support anybody. So if you want to do more for your communities, you're going to have to find compromises with other people. You need to have physicians at the table. You need to have industry at the table. You have to have patients at the table. You have to agree and partner and work together, because more voices that are asking, really and truly, it's that squeaky wheel mentality. You just get a lot of squeaks going on in Washington. You can absolutely make things happen. And so working with others, and making sure that you're at least saying the same thing. You may not go to the hill at the same time, but if the words coming out of my mouth match the words coming out of your mouth, and those congressional offices are hearing those over and over, they eventually pick up the phone and go, all right, guys, something's going on here. What is it? I need to know more, FDA, about what's going on with gastroparesis, or tell me where we are with funding on, for the CDC, those types of things, right? Like those happen. They just have to hear, and they have to understand that it's not just one person. There's a groundswell. Like there's people that are interested. So that's always really important, and to make sure that you're just being a part of that conversation and you're placing yourself at as many tables as possible. I had a mentor once tell me that if you aren't sitting at the table, then you're likely on the menu. And we don't want to be on the menu, right? We don't want to be pushed aside. We want to be at that table, and we want to be sitting there and part of that conversation. So making sure that you're working with as many other people to do that is really, really important. And also that you're not doing it once. It's great to go and meet with the VA and talk about the needs of the GI military veterans and our servicemen, and how the GI tract is affected once. But if you don't do it again, if you don't go back at least every year, or at least send an email from time to time and say, hey, remember me? Remember the GI community? Remember what our issues are? What are you doing about that? And how can I facilitate you doing more? They're going to forget. So make sure that you're always following up. You email, schedule the meeting, or a Zoom if that's what works for you. And then afterwards, you follow up with an email. Thank you for your time. That's so important. And also in writing, here are the things that I said to you. Please don't forget them. And then you wait, a couple months, 3, 6 months, whatever. You email them again. And then, at the 1 year mark, you say, hey, let's have another conversation. Let's see what we've done since our first meeting. And you continue that as a conversation. And honestly, that's relationship building, right? So there are people in the VA and the DOD that they're in my emails. I type in their first name, they pop right up, and I send them an email and they respond. Why? Because they know that I'm going to keep emailing until they do. And so, and I do that in a very friendly way. Remember, we don't want to be confrontational in Washington like that, or with any type of advocacy we do. And you can advocate in your workplace, in the classroom, in your communities, but you never want to do that in a way that's negative or argumentative, because people don't want to hear that. And they're not going to be receptive to what you're saying, because emotionally they can't get past their dislike for the front that's coming at them. And so the forefront of their mind is just thinking about, wow, this person is very angry. Wow, there's a lot of heat in their voice. They're not hearing what's coming out of your voice, because their brain is too busy thinking of, wow, why is their body language so stiff? And they're processing too much at once. So make sure that you're very calm, and you make your requests as just non-confrontational as possible, even though a lot of what we have to say is emotional. We have people that die, right? Like that's makes us angry. It makes us sad, and we want someone to do something about it. We got to rein that in if we want to have a conversation that flows easily and build relationships. So biggest thing to remember is to be patient and to meet often. And don't let them forget who you are. My goal is for all of these agencies, for someone to go, Ceciel, and everyone go, oh yeah, I know her. How's she doing? Because that, honestly, like that's what you want. You want to make sure that your name is recognizable, and that your organization is recognizable. So what are some other things you can do that's even deeper, right? So there are things you can do. So honestly, I always make the joke that when Nancy and Bill started going to Washington to advocate, they spent so much time on that NIH campus that they were assigned to two different advisory councils. I'm not actually joking. Nancy Norton served on two different advisory councils at the NIH. And the reason for that is she attended council meetings. She began to show up at the council meetings and be a face, and then introduced herself and said, I'm very interested. The patient community I represent is very interested. And so I'm here. And then eventually they just put her on the council because she was there anyway. And she had good things to say and good questions to ask. And so be present and be a part, like show up at public meetings that you are able to show up to. There's also Zoom options. You can attend meetings by Zoom and then send questions afterwards that you have, right? Some thoughts. Be involved. If you want to get to that next level, then you have to start involving yourself in that level. And so for me, I just cycled off being on the NIDDK Advisory Council. A couple years ago, I got to know the staff there. They actually still email me for requests because I was attending every meeting. And so I would go to the council meetings. I was there. I introduced myself to people, and then they invited me to be on the council. And then of course I did my work, right? Like if they sent me research things to read, I read them. If I had feedback, I gave those, right? I asked the right questions. And so they actually still email me because they see me as an honest broker who's willing to put in the effort and that I care. And so those are the types of things that you want to make sure that you're doing with these governmental agencies. It is not difficult because there's not many people that care and are present. So if you are one of the people that's showing up, that's not required to be there, they're going to notice. And they're going to be like, why are you here? Oh, because you care. Well, wait a minute. If you care, then we want you helping us. And that will get you into the door. That also works with really and truly any of the agencies. The more times that you meet with them, the more they begin to call on you. The FDA gave me an email and said, so we'd like to hear from patients. Can you help organize that for me? And of course, the answer is yes, we'd be happy to. So we've actually worked with the FDA to hold several listening sessions with different patient groups. And so there's a lot that you can do just by being present and being someone that they recognize. And so then they begin to look at you as someone to partner with. There are things that you can do that where you really have to sort of like aggressively get involved, and that's through applications. I just came off the FDA engagement collaborative a year ago, and that you do by application. Like the FDA is not going to reach out and say, hey, Ceciel, do you want to be on the council? They're not going to do that. Instead, they do a call for applications and you apply. And then you go through an entire process. I actually did the screening and voting process on that with the FDA for the last group that was brought on. It's a lot. It's a lot of stuff that you have to fill out in the application. And there's a lot of stuff that you're scored on. But it's worth it because if you get through that process, then you're part of a very small group of about 24 people that work with the FDA to help them in ways. While I was on the engagement collaborative, they were redesigning parts of their website. And so they were asking us to beta test it. And so there's really some, just some great things that you can do. Also gets them familiar with who you are and what your organization does and who your organization is. And so then if they have a need, then they're going to be emailing you and say, hey, I met you when you were on the collaborative. And so I'd really love your assistance with learning more about this patient population. And so, but you have to apply. And if you don't apply, you're not going to get on it. And so that's important. PCORI is the exact same design. They have an advisory council at PCORI where the NIH is going to invite you. PCORI needs you to apply. And they do that once a year. And I think the cycle is coming up really, really soon. But if you start getting on the PCORI emails, they do whole webinars on how to apply. They tell you right up front what positions they're looking for, what they're looking for those positions, and how to apply for those. And so if you want to be a part of that, then you just have to take the initiative and subscribe to those emails from these governmental agencies, and you will be surprised at how many opportunities will pop up, more than you will be able to do. There are many things that I will look at and I'm like, oh, this would be great. I just don't have the bandwidth right now because there's a lot. So you get to the point where you'll need to prioritize what's most important for your patient community. But you can absolutely just apply. And if you don't get it the first year, apply again. And if you don't, apply again. Just keep applying. Be that squeaky wheel in Washington. They say that for a reason, right? The squeaky wheel gets the reason in Washington. There, it's true. Like if you prove that you're not giving up, like I am going to help my patient population no matter what, then eventually they're going to like, all right, come on, sit down. Let's have a chat about this. It's going to happen. You just, sometimes it takes persistence for that to happen. So those are sort of really great ways to get involved with Washington. Another way, and I'll just mention this because it's very costly, is holding congressional meetings is also something that really gets the attention of a lot of people. And with those, as an organization, you would work with someone, probably one of the senators for your state or congressman of your district, rent a room in the congressional building and invite staffers to come hear about a specific thing that is of concern for your patient community. This generally coincides with a piece of legislation that you're looking to pass or a specific priority in your legislative agenda, like medical research funding or something like that. You're going to bring in experts, you're going to bring in patients, you're going to invite the congressional folks to come in. And just from prior experience, Chick-fil-A is really, really a hit. They show up for that. So the staffers come in, you give them something to eat, they listen to people speak, and then they go back and they talk to their bosses, right? It's extremely impactful, but it does cost money to do that. And you have to make sure that you really have a specific driven goal, that there is really something that you want to get out of that. IFFGD has done these for GI issues for veterans. We were able to get several of the functional GI disorders listed into Gulf War illness by holding several congressional sessions. We also have done this in collaboration with other groups for things like step therapy and the medical foods. So those types of things can be very, very impactful, but they really need a purpose. And if you have questions about that, I'm happy to have individual conversations with people as well. My email address is just what you see on the screen, ctrooker@iffgd.org. And so happy to take this conversation further with anyone that is interested. But, you know, we've talked a lot about sort of like the Washington advocacy. And I've mentioned, you know, patients need to feel comfortable advocating at home as well, advocating sometimes with their own families, definitely in the workplace, a child in school, and then, you know, just in their communities, sometimes, especially in our community, like access to bathrooms, right, is really, truly important. So advocating for that right to be able to, for a child to be able to use the bathroom multiple times during the school day, or access to restrooms in the community, things like that are things that patients need to be able to do, and just be able to feel comfortable, right? Being able to advocate. And those are things you want to also help them with if that is within your mission, and having those conversations and letting them know that's okay. And so,
Wonderful job so far.
thank you.
Ceciel, I don't want to misstep. But we do have a question in the chat, and it's from Karen Mitchell. Her question is, how does your gastro community feel about man-made emulsifiers in food?
So yes, we definitely feel that natural is better, preservatives and all those other chemicals and things you can't pronounce. And what we generally tell people is like, if you can't pronounce it, you probably shouldn't eat it. And it's definitely difficult though, right? Because there's a balance, because a lot of time when you want to do something that's all natural, you're looking at either doing it from scratch, like cooking everything with raw ingredients, or buying something that's made by a manufacturer that use all natural ingredients, and that's very expensive. And so we do a lot with nutrition and diet and educating about a lot of the different chemicals. There's fact sheets on that are written by dietitians that are on our website. We actually have not put this issue actually on our legislative agenda. We are focused in the area of foods, and this is just personal, right? That's just because for us, we have so many people that are on tube feedings and have other medical foods that they need just to make it from day to day. And those medical foods are often not covered by insurance.
Mm.
And so, for example, someone with EOE likely will need to drink a nutritional supplement if they have a severe case. Those are not covered by most insurance companies. And that can be thousands of dollars a month just for them to get these shakes to drink every month. And people often don't have that kind of money, right? And so trying to get that piece of legislation across the finish line is sort of where our focus is with food.
Mhm.
I don't disagree with you at all, Karen, that all of these chemicals that we're putting in our food is really, they're bad for the digestive system. They're killing all kinds of good things in the tract, not to mention some of those things do disrupt the lining of the intestines. And so I think that absolutely awareness is important. And so that kind of, thank you. That's a little bit of a segue into the other part of like the not just the advocacy, but awareness, which was what I was going to talk about next. So thank you. And honestly, one of those things is that if you want people to listen to what you have to say, they have to know that you know what you're saying and that you're a trusted resource. And so you do that through education and awareness. And so for us, it would be to make sure that we have fact sheets available in our resource library. We have web pages that contain that information, and that we're going out on social media and raising awareness about those areas, that we are being seen as an honest broker of information, that what we are saying is scientifically accurate to the highest level, and being edited by thought leaders in this space. And
Yeah.
so,
So I was just wondering, like, and as part of that question, I was wondering about in your community, specifically man-made emulsifiers. Like I read the NIH studies.
mhm,
Most people, because it doesn't affect them, they don't get it. They don't get that it is damaging, and it's kind of like the canary in the coal mine, the people that are affected by these things.
mhm,
It's not good for really anybody, right? But it's just that
right.
people, it's much worse. I was just wondering how much of an awareness about that particular issue, the emulsifiers like lecithin, polysorbate 80, sorbate, and monostearate, and so on. Is that something that really affects a lot of people with GI issues? Is it
It
well
does.
known? Okay.
It does. I will tell you that honestly, that's probably not something that most of them know is an issue.
Mhm.
And when they work with dietitians, that's something that is definitely they a lot of times is focused on, because we do work with GI dietitians, right? So that's very specific. But it does affect, because we do have a lot of autoimmune and in the GI tract, because the GI tract is one of the largest systems in the body, and it affects so much that there's often comorbid conditions. It's like me, I have two diagnosed, one suspect. I haven't gone through all the testing. Um, but there's so many comorbid conditions, and there are a lot of people, and it's like chicken egg, but autoimmune disorders almost always coincide with GI symptoms.
Yes, that's what I was wondering. Yeah. Mhm.
Yeah, so whether it's the GI condition that's maybe leading to the autoimmune disorder, or is it the autoimmune disorder that's causing the GI condition, or is this just happens that if you're prone to one, you're prone to the other? But there's so much there, there's so much overlap with those for sure. And we are finding that the autoimmune community is beginning to catch up with that, and we are doing more awareness about how GI conditions can be the very first sign of
Mhm.
autoimmune disorders and other things as well. For example, Parkinson's disease, the GI tract is the first place that picks that up.
Mhm.
And a very keen gastroenterologist would be able to point people in the direction of testing for Parkinson's disease based on their GI symptoms. But
Mhm.
there's also autoimmune disorders that are the same way, like their GI manifestations first, and then they get diagnosed with an autoimmune disorder. So I think it's something that we probably, and be honest with you, Karen, I think that's an area that we should definitely put on the whiteboard. So we have a whiteboard in the office of all the things we want to do that
Mhm.
we don't have the bandwidth for. But I think we have been trying to connect with more autoimmune societies, and because we don't want to cover autoimmune disorders as a whole, because that's not really in our lane, and we have so much on our plate that it's overflowing. So working with other people, and love to take this offline, Karen, and maybe we could jointly co-author some fact sheets about autoimmune disorders and these specific man-made emulsifiers and how they affect the GI tract, right? And how what you're eating honestly can be helpful or non-helpful to what you're doing. And so happy to work to talk to you about that, and maybe doing some things that are co-branded.
Okay.
And because that's the only way we're going to get done, right?
Mhm.
I can't do it all. You can't do it all, but we can maybe do more together. So, um, but that's very important. But raising awareness about all these little things and making sure that you are providing really great content is going to give everyone, and I don't just mean, we're not doing this for government agencies, right? We're doing this because the patients need it and the education is important. But honestly, if you're not doing some of these other things, you may get some questions in Washington. And when you're trying to advocate, one of the questions is, well, who are you and why should we be listening to you? Like, what else? What are you doing? Who do you know? Who are you working with? Who else trusts you? Are there thought leaders in the field that are writing your scientific content? Can we trust what you have to say? Do you really have a community that backs you up? Are you just talking about yourself as a person, or are you representing the community? And that happens through social media, newsletters. Like, how big is your reach and how many people work with you, right? So, all of that sort of awareness and education that you do, that is maybe for IFFGD, that's the core. That's what we do, right? The advocacy is sort of like this arm that built to help provide more information, right? Like, it's just kind of a full circle thing. But all of those things are really, really important. And so focusing on making sure that you're doing all of the right things for the patient, right? And that you're following the patient needs, that you're surveying them, your patients, your community, and what do they need, and then you're fulfilling those needs, and that you're speaking on behalf of them when you are in Washington and other places is so, so important. But awareness is really, really key in getting your messaging out. IFFGD actually sponsors 3 events on the HHS National Health Observances calendar, which is dormant right now, but we're hoping is going to be revived. But that we take that very seriously as the official sponsor of IBS Awareness Month, Gastroparesis Awareness Month, and GERD Awareness Week. We provide a lot of materials for that. And so I think that being involved in all the little ways is really going to be able to show yourself as an honest broker to do more. And I think that I've gone over time. Reggie?
No, you're doing fine. We do have a question.
Okay.
Julie, your hand is raised.
Yes, Cecile, I was just wondering if you could touch more on how to get involved in the international sphere. I know you've talked a lot about US and getting involved on the Hill. But yeah, I was just wondering how you get your message through international channels and everything.
So one of the things that I've learned is that international, like every country really listens to their people, right? Those are people that they're responsible for. However, we are an international organization, and many of our patients live I mean, they live all over the world. And so the only real way to make a true impact internationally is if you are not from that country, is to partner and collaborate with the organizations that are, right? The researchers that are. So we have people on our advisory council all over the world. And so, for example, Nick Talley is Australian. He is in Australia and he is on my advisory board, and I've known him for 2 decades. And he is part of an Australian Center of Excellence, which is sort of like an NIH kind of thing, but it's the Australian way of doing that. And I'm on his advisory board because I have networked with him and I've collaborated with him, right? Like I know him. And then working with other nonprofit organizations that work with patients, like in the UK. We collaborate with some of them, and then if they're working on something and they need more voices at the table, you work with those, right? And you get introduced to the opportunities to do things. I've spoken to a group in Italy that were drug making and to government agents. I forget their actual name, but it was actually on behalf of a pharma company in Italy that came to me and said, I need to work with patients. And I supplied them patients for focus groups for the development of their drug. And then they asked me to actually meet with the agency to talk about like what the patient needs are. And so those types of things happen just sort of organically. You can put your effort in certain places, right? Like I want to really collaborate with physicians, thought leaders around the world. I want to collaborate with other organizations that complement what I do, and help us grow our organizations together side by side so that we're making a bigger footprint for this specific disease state. But networks and collaborations are just the key to get international. Like that's how you're going to make your difference. Is if you are representing people from around the world, then you need to be working with people around the world. Looks like
Wonderful
there's a
answer,
question.
Cecilia. Yes. We
Uh-huh.
have another question in the chat.
Oh, pancreatitis, absolutely. Yes. So we have a
Yes.
lot of we have information on pancreatitis. There's so much that we do with that group. Love to discuss collaborating in that area.
And speaking as a person that has pancreatitis in his past, a very painful illness
Oh
is very, very.
yeah.
Uh, do we have any more questions?
Right. I see about how to encourage community to participate in clinical trials. So we do that in just many different ways. And one is, yes, you're just going to continue to encourage them to participate. We have a newsletter that goes out once a month, and in that newsletter we highlight 3 research studies. They're not all clinical trials. Some of them are government initiated studies. Some of them are surveys. Some for medical students even, right? Like it's different types of research opportunities, and it is actually the #1 clicked link on our newsletter every month is people wanting to get involved in those things. And so whether they follow up and go all the way through, at least they're looking at them. So having sort of a way for them to know what types of things they can do, really encouraging people to do things that are more benign to them. For example, if somebody says, hey, I don't mind doing surveys. I don't mind being a part of a focus group. I'm a little concerned about taking a drug at this point. If they become part of a research process and they say, oh, actually, this is exciting. Like I'm doing this survey. They're letting me know the results. I feel like I'm a part of this. Then they build trust in the research system. And so offering them all those opportunities from the little ones leading up to the clinical trials, I think that is helpful because it helps them to get sort of confident in what they're doing. And so we do a lot of that, of taking people along the way. And I'm talking to them individually about, well, how do you want to participate? And let's find a place to plug you in. So because I know clinical trials can be really, really scary for people who don't understand them. So the education is important, what it is, what is a consent form, all this kind of stuff is important. So having those educational materials available. Also the social media is good, but a lot of that is you get to meet them where they are and get them comfortable with the concept and then help them to grow in their comfort level with you, if that makes sense.
Cecilia, your passion is so intense and so needed in the autoimmune stratosphere. We really are happy to have you as one of our leaders. And do we have any more questions? I know we're coming up in time. Want to be appreciative of other people's schedule. If we don't have any more questions, Cecilia, on behalf of the Autoimmune Registry, we are so happy that you came today and shared all your intellectual skills and fact findings that you have done. And we have one statement: "Be the bridge" is my takeaway.
I like that. I like
I
that.
like that too. That's a very great comment. Uh,
Absolutely.
with that, thank you from our organization. We are all about hardening and breaking down barriers in the autoimmune community. And you were a perfect example of that. Next month, March 26th, we will have Corey Wolf from the Patient Health Alliance that will be our guest next month on March 26th. So with that, thank you for attending, and we're looking forward to seeing you next month. Thank you.